I came to Nimbin. I wasn't at the Aquarius Festival. I was just discovering weed, which happened in Afghanistan, which couldn't have been a better place, probably, in 1973 when they had the Aquarius Festival. So then I kept trying to adapt into Australia, and I'd come back here from India, and Nimbin was the only place that looked semi-normal. So I kept visiting. And then I moved here with a young family in the mid-80s. And I opened a junk shop over the road. And in those days, weed was being dealt by all the heroin addicts on the street. And it was a lively market, and everyone knew you could score weed in Nimbin, and especially the Gold Coast would all come here. And they educated me. So I've got this junk shop, and they're out the back dealing all the time, and I'm never going to go take them to the cops, but they actually educated me. And then Bob Hopkins came along and got me reading books. And kind of when I woke up, because I loved pot from the go-get, didn't really think much about prohibition until I came to Nimbin. And then it was Bob who got me reading, and the more I read, the more I thought, this is fucking massive. You know, to control the pain relief market is possibly the best business on the planet. And statistically with armaments, and they're mixed up together, it is. It's as big a turnover as anything on the planet. Because, you know, everyone just wants to feel good, as I understand it, which is totally a health issue, I reckon. And it's important to say that good and God come from the same root, I reckon. So, as I slowly realised that, you know, and we got these shocking helicopter raids every year attacking the hippie communities, and it was like sport for them. Come up from Sydney, stay in a Byron motel, and come down ropes on terrifying hippie communities, terrifying animals, a chopper over your house. It's totally like a Vietnam War movie, you know. My marble didn't come out, so I didn't go, but it was, you know, it was full on. So we did the first march. Bob Hopkins' idea, he's going to get himself arrested, and so he took a joint in his Joker's hat to the station and go, I want to be arrested, you know. There's that great movie of it, and we had a great day. We all marched up there, and David Halpern was even there, a young lawyer. They took him inside, and they didn't even charge him. I think they were worried what would happen. So we had such a good day. I think 700 people came. We thought every year we're going to do this till the laws change. And that's how MardiGrass got born. So for the first 5 or 6 or 7 years, we just had the best time. There was one cop in town. I clearly remember hippies had their little blanket on the footpath with their buds marked, you know, $4. So it was very casual. Police weren't an issue at all. Parking was a nightmare because the showground was run by the rednecks and they wouldn't let us in there. So there were cars bogged for miles. It was chaos. So I got into quite a lot of trouble. So we had to get people off the street, and we created the Hemp Olympics, a sort of educational event to get people off the street, try to educate the Hemp Olympics chief this year's. That's the bong throw measuring tape used every year.
I'm the world champion speed joint roller.
She is the world champion speed joint roller. So that's become a fantastic event. And you know, then we'd have talks in the hall. Kathleen, Miss Guidance took over the talks because it was shit. I'd invite all these people to talk and there'd be no one in there, and you know, the chairs weren't set up, so she took it over and has turned it into a terrific event. Anyway, the police kind of got onto it. It took a while. There was a bad story in the Herald. We sold 2,000 joints out of the hemp bar one day, and you know, then they sent the police came quite big. They sent the riot squad. They sent horses one year, which was like a joke, and they even sent a water cannon, and it was like, we just had fun with it, and I think we've decided early, you know, we're not going to have a win quickly with this protest, so we've got to enjoy it. So we made that a focus, really, I think. There's lots of comedy here. The comedy tent over there, that's a crew from Sydney, and it's nearly all stoners, and that's a crew from Sydney who just turned. And I think it just got its own momentum, and as cannabis use grew and got more popular, more people came, the roadblocks have completely changed it, and in a way, it's crowd control because the village couldn't handle 10,000 people, you know. And honestly, 3/4 of people don't come because of the roadblocks. I know heaps of North Coast people who just, it's too big a, you know, it's automatic loss of licence for 3 months in New South Wales, and we all know it's total bullshit. So that's made a huge difference to MardiGrass, but ironically, it made it much easier for us because we couldn't handle the massive crowds. So it's been interesting. I've struggled a bit because I remember the bloody, probably National Party member for Coffs Harbour got up one day and said, "Now you want to legalise cannabis? You want everywhere to look like Nimbin?" It was the end of the conversation. So personally, I've struggled with that a bit because I don't think hippies are the best spokespeople to convince everyone else that weed's okay, you know. So it's been fantastic. We've got members of Parliament now who can talk and wear suits. Good old Jeremy, you know. Which is, you know, it was a huge sacrifice for him. He's had to lease his beautiful place in Bellington, go to the city, rent a place in there and take kids. So a lot of people, I'll start crying now. Jim, there's all these people who put so much work into MardiGrass. Like, fucking exhausting. Because, you know, like I said, Nimbin's busy. People are busy. They've got big lives, overgrown gardens. So it's hard to get much. I get backpackers. For years we had backpackers helping, but fucking sometimes they can't speak English. And you say, you know, carry this table down the showground with you, and they go to the fucking garage, you know. So it's been hard. Volunteers are critical. It's pretty much all volunteers, and thanks to the Nimbin community who kind of gets it, and not everyone smokes pot here, but possibly half the people. You know, people get the importance of the cause, get that Nimbin, it's ended up being Nimbin's annual festival, if you like, and it's a festival with a purpose. I love that. I couldn't just have a Tibertine festival, you know. There's sort of too much important shit to do. So the last years it's settled into a routine. The cops have backed off, only because of that saliva testing, because they kind of know they can control the crowd, I reckon. Yesterday they went home at 4:30. Last year they went home like that. They're kind of working an 8 to 4 day. That's a big change. But they'll be here Monday, full on, I bet you. So, you know, I just, don't get me started on police, because I know good cops, and the laws are just shocking, and they're embarrassed by it, a lot of them, thank God. So, you know, it's a slowly evolving event. This is the 32nd year, I think, and it's going to be hard to stop, even when the laws change, so we might get more organised then. We'll get government grants then. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Michael. So the panel's titled Voices of Change, and I'd say that Michael and his community is one of the biggest voices of change in an outstanding movement. We're all indebted to you and your work. And the fact that people stand by your side year by year is a representation of your passion and the community's need for change. And we all thank you so much, Michael. Now, thank you. For another voice of change, we're going to go in a chronological order. So Caine Barlow is here. He's got the EGA hat on today. I will just politely say that most people here contribute and support every organisation that is here today. So most of us in some way have supported other organisations, even though we might have a primary organisation. I could name the hundreds of things that people have done to support the other organisations. So it is a community. It is a community with tensions and flux and love, but we all try to help each other out when we can, and that's the only way we can move this movement and this resistance forward, because we're not going to stand for it. And this is an example of 30-year dialogue of not standing for it. So, Caine, if you can give a little bit of a background for EGA and your personal contribution to an organisation like that.
That's on. EGA stands for Entheogenesis Australis. It evolved out of, I guess, a loose network of people wanting to come together to talk about plant medicines. So it kind of grew out of the Entheobotanica conferences that happened in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then a lot of members kind of wanted to get together and talk in Victoria, and that's where Entheogenesis Australis is based. And so they started having meetings at the Ringwood Library, and at some point formalised it and created EGA as we know it. I feel a bit weird because we've got two of the founders here. We've got Martin Williams and Jonathan Carmichael. I came along a little bit later than that, so I wasn't there for the early days. But essentially it was just, a network of people who wanted to be able to come together and talk about entheogenic plants and fungi. So ayahuasca, cactus, mushrooms, and a handful of other plants. And there were some really interesting people, very academically oriented, and wanted to be able to talk about plants in that academic sense. Not just kind of recreational, but academic, research, and culture. Because we have a really interesting culture around plant medicines here in Australia. And we wanted to be able to get together and talk about it. And so EGA then started an annual conference. And I think the first one was in 2004, which then marks this year the 20th anniversary of that first get-together. And then from every year on from that, there was a conference for about 10 years, and at a certain point we then made it kind of every 2 years, and then I think it's kind of been more 3 years the last, or even more. Yeah, that's kind of the whole pandemic thing just threw everything, so.
Is there one this year?
Not this year, sorry. So, it's not up to me to announce it.
So we do online, so we definitely have a presence that goes through the year, and our website has a lot of resources. But we can't formally announce anything, but we can hint that I think it's December 5th to 8th next year. I have to check my calendar. We're going to have an outdoor conference in Victoria, which is I guess the one that has the most demand, because it's a very big point of difference to anything anyone else has been doing, and probably what we're most famous for. So it's not a formal announcement, but it's a big hot, get the calendar out. So it'll be the first formal weekend of December next year.
All right,
I'll let you go from there, Caine.
Yep. My first EGA was in 2007. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I just kind of turned up at, it was in Strathbogie Ranges, a couple of hours drive out of Melbourne. I turned up with a few other people, and he was just this incredible, eclectic gathering of just fascinating, like-minded people, and it was just like, I found my tribe. It was just like, we're all here talking about plants, fungi, entheogens, and the whole cultural kind of dynamic around that. And I was sold, and pretty well just got involved, not straight away, but within a year, and it was networking with Jonathan, and yeah. Over the time period, I've contributed to the website, and I'm now helping with creating resources about particularly fungi, helping to give out information for harm reduction, so to help people identify mushrooms, the different species that are present, but EGA also has other people contributing as well, so material about cacti and other plants. So we're very, very busy developing resources to be able to help in the educational space.
I will just add to that one of the things that we found, as you'll find at an event like this, is that a lot of us are kind of like plant nerds and drug nerds, but you need a space to feel comfortable. 20 years ago, it wasn't as easy to turn up to Christmas and talk about mushrooms with your mum for medical use. These days you can. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, not as easy. It was possible. But one of the biggest things was when you get 400 or 500 people together that aren't used to being safe, talking about these things so publicly and openly, the space that forms and the connections between people are very heightened, and everyone just has such a fantastic time really connecting and being themselves, because we often hold ourselves back. We all know when we get to areas of the law and fringe elements of ourselves, we kind of have to decide, what can this group handle? And at an EGA you can really download. So everyone felt that it was a really safe space, and that's kind of what really, not surprising, but was, the factor that we didn't really know when we put it together. I'm going to now go to Martin Williams and our sister organisation. So EGA pretty much figured out that it was having a lot of fun and we were educating each other, but we wanted to do a little more, and we knew that, my beard wasn't the public face. So the co-founder Martin here probably had no beard, but decided to shave it off, and I'll introduce Martin Williams from prison.
Thanks very much. Yeah, once upon a time I did actually have a beard, not a long time. Fell out. So one real feature of, sorry if it's starting to ring a bit, one feature of EGA was that we had guest speakers from around Australia and around the world who would come and share their experience, and a number of those people were involved in the early the early psychedelic research movement, clinical research, beyond clinical research, and it was just such a fundamental part of the EGA sort of experience and our offering to the community. And by that stage we were pretty well networked with organisations such as MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies in the US, and a couple of organisations in the UK. And so we were aware of the research taking place, and in fact in 2010 it was in Melbourne metro area, that particular symposium that we had, and Rick Doblin, the executive director of MAPS, was there with us. And of course you may be aware that MAPS has pioneered the research into the clinical use of MDMA specifically for post-traumatic stress disorder, but also some other conditions, and it's also been very strong on cannabis reform and research as well, of course. And so Rick Doblin was our guest in 2010, and the day after that symposium we had a workshop where a number of our speakers all got together, and Rick Doblin was there, and really the idea was floated that perhaps it was time for Australia to make a contribution to the global research effort looking at psychedelic, particularly clinical, but also beyond clinical sort of aspects of psychedelics. And so at that time we had the support, financial support and moral support, and some material support from MAPS to see if we could get a clinical trial underway in Australia. And so we put our heads together and put together a protocol, put that to an ethics committee. We're very promptly knocked back, unfortunately. But in retrospect, I think it was just way too early for Australia to be accommodating any kind of psychedelic research at that time. So PRISM was born at that time. So 2011 was the UE Incorporated, and PRISM stands for Psychedelic Research in Science and Medicine. And from that point, we continued to advocate for research, to do fundraising for research, and although we didn't really gain any traction until that real sort of stars aligning pivotal EGA of 2017, we really became the sort of the de facto advocates or the spokespeople for research and clinical applications and psychedelics more generally in Australia. Things really changed, as I said, with the largest to date EGA outdoor conference in near Eildon in Victoria in 2017, and that was when I was approached by a clinician at St Vincent's Hospital, MardiGrass, and she works in palliative care, dealing with people who are at the end of life, and she's a clinical psychologist and psychosocial clinician, and she was frustrated by the lack of their capacity, their lack of capacity to help some people who were really, really frozen by the prospect of their approaching death. And so she became aware of the research that had been taking place, particularly in the USA. And she came to me at the same time as some organisations came forward and offered funding for research. And so that was how Australia's first psychedelic clinical research project, which was at St Vincent's Hospital in Melbourne, using psilocybin-assisted therapy for the treatment of anxiety and depression associated with terminal illness, came about. That started in 2019, and we treated the first participant just before the pandemic, and then had to take a year a year off before recommencing in 2021. And I'm happy to say that study has just concluded around midway through last year, and we're putting together all those results. It's been a phenomenally successful, very, very profoundly successful study, so we're very, very happy with that. And in the meantime, of course, we've been able to gain funding and contribute funding to some other research projects. So I'm happy to say that really Australia is taking its place among the global research countries, looking at medical applications of psychedelics such as psilocybin and MDMA and some other psychedelics as well. But yeah, PRISM really takes a very proud place as an organisation that has been working towards the destigmatisation, the legitimisation, but through a particular avenue, and this is in line with a global movement towards what we call medicalisation of psychedelics. And I'll actually be giving a talk, a little mini spruik. I'll be giving a talk this evening here at 7 p.m. Looking at psilocybin and the potential for other psychedelics within that medical clinical model. But tomorrow in the hall at 10:15, I'll be talking about beyond medicalisation and other applications of psychedelics for what we call the betterment of well people, such as all of us. Because so there's plenty of scope to explore here, and this is only going to sort of broaden and expand the awareness and also the applicability of psychedelics. So yeah, thanks very much for coming along.
Thank you, Martin. We're now going to go to Simon Beck. Simon Beck is a volunteer and I believe a committee member for the APS. A very fantastic organisation. It's been in the field for how long now? About 6 years. Okay, well if you can give us a little bit of background on when the APS formed and why it may be formed, and sort of how it operates today, what it does and contributes to the community.
Again, in terms of like the overlap that exists between these organisations, Caine and Ronnie I think were actually involved with the APS long before I was. But I think the APS sort of formed around 2018, that's when we incorporated anyway as a not-for-profit, with the goal of sort of creating spaces for people to find their community, with people who shared an interest in psychedelics. And I think what Ronnie said before is so true, that often it's difficult to find groups where you can share those opinions openly and not face stigma, and explore it from a cultural and a personal therapeutic and an academic sort of perspective, because there's such a wide diversity of people who have different approaches to their interest in psychedelics in Australia, and I think it's like an awesome community that exists because of that diversity. You've got all these different views and different interests within that same umbrella who can come together and share those interests and learn from each other and support each other, and all sort of progress together as that change in culture and change in the acceptance within the broader community has happened across particularly these recent years with the medicalisation that Martin was talking about. So APS now has chapters in all the state capitals except I think Canberra and except Darwin, and a few little satellite groups in some of the smaller locations around Australia as well. Big online presence too, running sort of talks and information events, and I think over time as well progressing and moving more into policy advocacy. So we've put some submissions into parliamentary inquiries where they're looking at changing drug laws to give a psychedelic specific approach, and some thoughts around that, because I think when people find out what some of the laws around some of the psychedelic substances are in Australia, it's pretty mind-blowing. The New South Wales laws, for example, if you get caught with mushrooms, they will charge the weight of the mushrooms as though it's pure psilocybin, even though that's, you know, a tiny percentage weight-wise of what the mushroom is, and the penalties can be absolutely enormous. You know, I know someone that got remanded to maximum security prison for quite a few months because they got caught with an ounce of mushrooms, and that was considered a large, you know, commercial quantity. You know, an ounce of cubensis for most people is a lot less than 10 doses. But nevertheless, they were in maximum security for quite a long time, and, you know, subsequently had to go through a legal process to get past that. So I think, you know, in terms of where the laws are up to, the laws around psychedelics really are, you know, exceptionally outdated and very, very harsh in a lot of states in Australia. So we've sort of moved more towards some of that policy advocacy as well. It was great we got to speak at the Queensland Parliamentary Inquiry when they were looking at changing their drug laws recently, which thankfully they have. Not as much as I think anyone would have liked to have seen, but it's sort of seeing these small steps of progress in several states and jurisdictions now, with the ACT and Queensland and even New South Wales recently making some changes to the Fines Act. So I think there is progress, and the community is a large voice for change in that group, and I think it's becoming easier because of the medicalisation and that sort of broader legitimacy of these substances and their potential benefits, or at the very least the fact that, you know, most of them, when used sensibly, aren't likely to be that harmful for most people. That is making it easier to see these changes happen. Also, APS sort of runs some peer-based integration circles for people who have had psychedelic experiences and want to share those and make meaning out of those with other people who've had similar experiences in a, you know, safe way, where maybe they don't need professional support after the experience, but might still get some benefit from exploring the meaning of those experiences with other people who might have different perspectives and things to share from their own experience. And also now increasingly moving into like health promotion and harm reduction materials and making lots of resources around that to provide some, I think, important education. The use of psychedelics in Australia is becoming a lot more popular with the broader press narrative that's occurring in the public and the broader public dialogue that's been going on. Obviously there's a lot of media coverage around the medical use of psychedelics, and that is being seen by people in the broader community, and that's spurring an increase in overall use. With that comes an increase in the risks, because I think when most of us maybe were starting out and getting interested in psychedelics, there was a community, and it was, I think, you know, people within that community that were maybe exploring them more than people in the broader community, so you could learn from people who already had experience, and that knowledge sort of got passed along fairly organically and dynamically that way. As well as some really important online forums from back in the day that I think provided a starting point into this community for, you know, me and I think a lot of other people as well. That over time, with broader sort of diversity in who is wanting to use psychedelics, that a lot of people are coming at it without necessarily having those community connections and being able to access that community knowledge that already exists. So to be able to actually provide some information to people who might be totally new to this, who are looking to have those experiences, so that they can do so in a way that is likely to be as safe as it can be, and so that they can get as much benefit out of it as they can, has become a really important focus for the organisation. Very small organisation, totally volunteer run, totally dependent on donations, you know, and I think an awesome team to be a part of. Certainly I feel privileged to have been able to take a role in that group. And it's also awesome to work alongside so many other, you know, committed, diverse organisations that are in the space and doing a lot of really important and really good work.
Thanks, Simon. So we've sort of got, we'll be questions in about 10 minutes, if that's all right. Sorry, we've just got one more contributor. So we've gone from the community really feeling like it wants to bond together to help educate, like peer-to-peer education, to sort of identifying that we need to get out and be pushing our own narrative in a research way. And the APS really provided, I guess, a chain between where people were doing peer-to-peer support and really just interacting to try to find the people like them that really just, they felt comfortable sharing their stories. And that's a very, very profound and powerful place for the APS to play, as well as many other roles. So now we've got Pix, who has recently formed an organisation called The Patch, which sort of takes, I think, personal engagement to a very strong, like a very, very, a different level. And I'll let Pix I'll let Pix give us a little rundown of the patch. Is that on?
Yeah, thanks, Rennie. So we started in 2022 after Four Corners episode had aired, Psyched Up. And I'd like to think that we're a bit of a response to more of the elements of the community that needed to maybe mature and grow up a little bit, where we needed to be able to, I guess, face each other and say, like, these are very powerful substances or medicines, and sometimes people can use them in nefarious ways, or sometimes it's not even necessarily through bad intentions, but things can go very easily awry, especially when the mind can wander at times under the influence as well. So we've definitely seen some issues emerge in this space, and whether it's people dosing other people as facilitators or some of the other organizations that are in this space, many things have come up along the way, and we again either let the narrative be directed at us, or we take control of that and step up and say, like, yes, we acknowledge that there's some issues here. We're not going to try to sweep that under the rug, and we're going to face them head on, and what can we do about that? And let's work together. Buddy system and all of that. So a bit like the APS, we also do have the opportunity for people to meet each other. We run a talking circle twice a month, and so one of them is just kind of like whatever you want to talk about, and once a month we also have a topic. So I guess like a focal point where we'll help educate a bit on a topic, and then we'll let people share their own experiences, ask questions, and we have I guess a diverse range of people through. I've got a couple of our committee also here, so again everyone's helping everyone's organizations, which is kind of how it should be, and also not reinventing the wheel. Like we don't want to all just be little islands. It is nice to be able to work together and offer different things to the community. So yeah, we like to do a lot of, I guess, outreach stuff in the sense of like bringing the community together to have a buy-in on the conversation as well. We don't just want to sit here and tell you how everything is. We invite you to have a seat at the table as well and help steer the ship. Like, what do we want this to look like? What is the future of psychedelics? How can we all be a part of shaping that future? And so we're definitely the new kids on the block, and we're still finding our feet. We're slowly getting all of the proper, structure and everything together, but we're hoping to continue to expand and be able to go to more events and things. But yeah, primarily we exist online at the moment, and that way anyone around Australia can come and be a part of the conversation. So if you're looking for more information or somewhere to go and talk to people, especially if you've had hard experiences that aren't necessarily just a difficult experience while you're tripping, but like if you've had issues with a facilitator, whether it's safety or other matters, we definitely have to talk about the conduct of people in this space, and now interestingly also in the clinical space as well, which we should not take for granted is just automatically going to go smoothly because it comes from a medical model. We've recently had to deal with some issues from that space as well. So we're just really here to be open to the fact that there are issues, and issues will arise like anything that humans set about to do. And that psychedelics are absolutely wonderful, but we just want to make sure that they can be enjoyed as safely as possible. So yeah, that's pretty much how the patch came to be.
Alright, we've got about 10 minutes, so we can take a couple of questions in that time. But I firstly just want to acknowledge that this panel is predominantly male, but if you actually sort of get down in the traps where these organisations function and run and how these events come together, there's so many amazing females and diversity that comes together to make these events happen. So we all know that misguidance, Kat, is just one of the many nodes that keeps this all together. So I just want to acknowledge Kat's work in bringing this particular space together up here and then, for working with MardiGrass and EGA and many other organisations, and for all of the other females that have contributed in such big ways that often isn't represented on stage, but that is represented in the event itself. Just want to say thank you.
Thanks for covering our ass there.
That's all right. It's organic. Okay, I can't really move, but you wanted to have first question?
Two questions very quickly. What's APS stand for?
Good question. Australian Psychedelic Society.
Okay, and I'm kind of interested in the legals. Like, will there be more around here this weekend about the legalisation and working with that, or is this it? Or
No. I mean, the main stage, the Hemposium, is the forum up here in the main hall. It's predominantly about reform and or
psychedelics?
for cannabis in general. Psychedelics here more.
And the panel straight after
Yeah.
this one will actually be talking about the last 12 months since the rescheduling of psilocybin and MDMA, and it'll be within the context of the medical model. But it is, I think it's an important conversation to sort of keep progressing as we watch how things are rolling out and how long it is taking, but how long it arguably should take.
We're all pro decriminalisation. We're all by definition of our work. We're all decriminalisation. You know, spokespeople. We're all criminals. Yep. And my mum's happy to have me as a criminal. So yeah.
Talking tonight at 7 o'clock on that, but just important.
Yep.
Okay, and might go for another question. Yep, sir.
Yeah, firstly, thanks to the panel. It's been really insightful to hear a bit more about the work you guys are doing in organisations. The thread that I've kind of picked up on is you're creating spaces for conversations to occur around the healing potential for psychedelics, kind of work with them. I guess everyone here is probably pretty, psychedelically informed. But what about people that are a bit more naive to psychedelics, friends, family members that you want to have conversations with? From your experience of working with organisations, what are some of the things that you've learned that would be helpful for having those kind of conversations? Whether it's sharing like personal stories around benefits of healing that you've experienced, or the science, or education.
Yeah, I'll add.
Yeah, just curious to know what's about.
Yeah, I think one of the fundamental bases is to be very truthful, to find good information, because the narratives that are out there that most people are fed before they even consider psychedelic experiences are often very flawed. So I think the basis of good education, information, and just openness, and making sure that you can have like a challenging experience that isn't necessarily a bad experience, and just letting people know that's all part of what may occur. But as far as research and education goes, most of our actual websites have a lot of resources. It's a really good starting point to give people. There's a sticker over here for EGA. You can go there and you can even get all the other organisations off our links. But I'll let Symon probably take that on. But I think just to reiterate that truth, a good source of information, and trust is a very good fundamental starting point.
Yeah, look, I think that's an awesome question. I think, so the setting I work in, for example, I think it is important to be aware of your context and make sure that you are safe to make disclosures if you're going to do that. There are some people who are going to respond differently to you saying, I think psychedelics are a good thing, I think they can be used safely and effectively and for benefit for people. Depending on who you're talking to, some people are still holding those stigmas that are largely based around old propaganda that got shared, decades and decades ago, but it has become part of a broader public narrative around these things. I think it's getting easier to counter some of that with the actual research that's now being published. So I think for whatever reason, people do put more weight in scientific literature than they do in common anecdote and community knowledge. Or certainly some people do anyway. So I think the more and more of that research that is being published, the easier it is to actually back up your statements. You can go and you can say, for most people these things can be used safely, they can be used effectively, providing they are approached in a sensible, educated manner, and here's the research to support that. I think Martin's talking about the potential of psychedelics in healthy individuals, as he said before. There's actually probably a lot more research in that population published in literature today than there is in any clinical population. So I think it's probably fair to say. So there is actually a lot of evidence to support this stuff, and I think if you are looking to make those sorts of disclosures to people and stuff, find your community first as well and make sure that you've got that support in the background, because I think that encourages a lot of people to actually feel more comfortable owning their viewpoints and finding ways to actually share that narrative with other people in your life. But unfortunately, I think to some extent it is still important to pick your audience, pick your context, know where you're going to be safe to do that or not. You know, there are still some professions, there are still some situations where it might actually still, for the moment, just be off the cards. I think there's also a difference between sharing personal narratives and personal experience and leaning on the research and leaning on the community knowledge and the community anecdote that exists. So in some contexts, you might be able to not outright say, I've used these things and I've benefited, but you might be able to have a conversation around, gee, isn't it interesting to see some of this stuff that's coming out? You know, this stuff's fascinating and it looks like there's some promise there. People might be more receptive to that than they would be to you actually just outright disclosing your personal views. But yeah, it's a good question. I think it's something that is tricky to navigate for everyone. And I think we've all probably had those experiences as well.
Just following directly from what Simon was saying, first, my little anecdote is I was at a school reunion year before last and started talking about the fact that I'm involved with colleagues in a psychedelic research organisation to one of my best old school buddies, and then he told me he'd been a copper for the last 30 years. He was not very sympathetic, I can tell you. But yeah, no, following from what Simon said, of course, we were sort of flailing around in the dark until a very well recognised and highly regarded global journalist and writer called Michael Pollan wrote a best-selling book, which really, I think, turned the tables completely. We at Prism had generally, well, actually, always very good press, very good media treatment and response. Even on some of the shock jock sort of radio programs that I was interviewed on, it was always with respect and some interest, and I was never denigrated or, you know, a couple of little snide remarks, but it wasn't a big deal. But when once that book How to Change Your Mind came out, it actually turned psychedelics into a legitimate dinner table conversation with family, friends, and everything else. And so I think that has really made a huge difference to the destigmatization. But exactly as Simon said, that book was primarily relating and translating some of the research that had been taking place over the last decade or so. So that was making it in a very palatable and popular, sort of popularly accessible sort of format, and I think that made a huge difference.
MardiGrass started off as a protest, but I quickly realised it was the gathering that counted. And all these pot smokers hiding away across Australia suddenly came together and shared their stories and didn't feel such weirdos and found people that understood them. And understanding for each, I think. It was critical, sharing knowledge, anecdotal, love it, you know.
People make the power.
Yeah.
Okay, one more question, and then we're going to have to finish up, and I'm afraid. Anyone?
How do we get, Pixie, how do we get in touch with the patch?
We might just open that up for a broader question, starting with Martin. Go Pix, go.
You can find us on Facebook as the Psychedelically Aware Talking Circle Hub, The Patch.
Yeah. Then Martin, how does one get into contact with Prism?
Prism's easy, so you can just Google Prism Psychedelics and it'll come up straight away. And yeah, we have a great website, resources and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's prism.org.au, very easy to find.
So for Entheogenesis Australis, our website is entheogenesis.org. Bit of a mouthful, but I would imagine you could probably put in psychedelics, EGA Australia, and EGA on Facebook. Yep, would work as well. So. And there's the YouTube, Entheo TV.
That's an easy one. Yeah.
Yeah, APS has a website as well. I think it's psychedelicsociety.org.au. We've got Facebook group for our national organisation, and then the chapters have their own Facebook groups. If you are interested in attending the chapter meetups, you can either get in touch with us at info@psychedelicsociety.org.au or through the website. or jump on Facebook for either the national page or one of the local chapters. They post all the stuff on there in terms of what's going on and where there are meetups and things. We also have a YouTube channel that has, quite a lot of awesome talks on it about policy and sort of culture of just psychedelics. So a few different ways to get in touch with us, and we're always looking for more volunteers as well. So if people are interested in volunteering with the organisation, or maybe starting a new APS group somewhere that we don't already have one, get in touch. We've got sort of processes in place to help you out.
Michael?
On the hempembassy.net website, you can register to get a weekly email from us, the headlines, which is worth doing, and everybody can join legalisecannabis.org.au. We'd love that.
All right. So most of the organisations here have a monthly or bi-monthly newsletter. I would recommend joining that because that is really the gem for any new resources, videos, or educational platforms, anything that comes out. We put it all into the newsletters. So I would recommend joining all of those newsletters. And it sounds like a dirty word, but support comes in many forms. So volunteering to support these organisations, making a philanthropic donation to help these organisations goes a long way. And just letting other like-minded people know about these organisations and the work they've done, because they've spent over 30 years of volunteer hours to really just support and educate each other. It's like a big hug. That's it. All right. Well, I'm gonna finish up and just thank our panel guests for coming, and thanks for coming out early to the first, psychedelic panel of the morning. Thank you very much.